Hey guys, today Intimate Encounters is back and we're joined again by Roxanne and
Hello.
and yeah, it's Sunday night here, so we're feeling the effects of the quarantine.
Yeah.
Hopefully this conversation is gonna turn it right around.
Yeah.
And so since we're continuing with the consent topic, we actually Roxanne came up with the idea of responding to one of the comments that was made on our last video. So there was a comment made that he thought that when he asked or tried to pursue a girl, that if they didn't have a straight like, okay, yes, affirmative, then it automatically meant no, only to after the girl would come up and say, why didn't you keep pushing? Why didn't you keep pursuing me? And so today we're going to be talking a bit around that. And yeah, so for now, I would really like to start by having Roxanne talk a little bit about that and things around that.
Totally, yeah. So I really appreciated that comment because I think that a lot of people probably have had similar experiences or might have that same question around like, being told by like men being told by women like, oh, you gave up too easy. And I think it's important to kind of situate this in the context of like our cultural understandings of gender and of sex that really set up like men as the pursuers, like they're the ones who actively seek sex, and women as the gatekeepers, women who are saying no until it's an appropriate time to say yes. And there's so much to explore around this, but like when we're thinking about enthusiastic consent, like where I want to kind of start from today is how these ideas around sex and this kind of narrative and how it like polices women's sexuality is actually a barrier to practicing enthusiastic consent.
For sure.
So like one of the things to kind of pick up on that from that is the idea of like slut shaming, and that when women do say, yes, I want this, or if women are the pursuers and the ones actively pursuing a sexual experience or dressing really sexually or whatever, they're often like shamed for it, stigmatized for it, they're seen as less valuable for it, they're called easy, they're called all sorts of things. And that's something that has really, really real consequences for women's lives. And so I think we need to be thinking about, in our conversations about consent, how can we work towards a consent culture? Part of that is addressing that reality, right? And working against that kind of slut shaming that we see and that's all around us all the time.
Adam, what do you think about this? Do you feel like you are a pursuer?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think especially because when I was a teenager, I would get like friend zoned all the time. So I have sisters. I don't have any brothers. I have 5 sisters. I'm the only boy. They're all younger than me. So I like love girls, and I, if anything, feel more comfortable around girls just because I've always been brought up with them. But because of that led to me just being friends with girls all the time, and then I would just be friends, and they'd be like, "Oh, but you're just a friend," and I'd be like, "But I want something more." And so now I do feel like one thing I've had to kind of cultivate in myself is being a bit more of a pursuer rather than being a friend, because I just found that if I go in as the friend, then it just never worked out for me.
I'm actually curious though as well. So you're saying that you do feel like the pursuer, but then have girls ever come up to you to pursue you, and what was your reaction to that?
I'd say no. I don't think any girls have come up to pursue me, and I would say it's not something I've heard of happening to many of my friends either. Like maybe to like Drake or someone. But
are you friends with Drake?
I wish. When I listen to that, I pretend I am.
All Canadians are.
Yeah.
We know him. So
yeah, you know him.
Sure.
He's a friend of a friend of a. Yeah.
What about you, Sam? Like, what's your kind of thinking or your like response to like this idea or like that narrative that we?
I mean,
that is so common.
I definitely see it. I like to pursue personally, and I find that I get a very different type of response from people. And if I talk to guys about it and they say, oh, you know, I'm looking for this quiet girl, this shy girl, this girl that's gonna, you know, let me pursue her. Whereas I feel constantly slut shamed because I'm the one who's being the aggressor. Because I personally don't like, I don't like being pursued personally. But I'm not like every girl at all. But I'm also very open about, you know, affirming my yes or my no in sex as well. So as you were saying, that this is a very important part of informed consent. So I just, I don't like that it exists. I don't like that there's a stigma behind like being a gatekeeper of your chastity, of your, you know, womanhood, and that you can't dress revealing and you can't ask guys out and you can't be like, yes, I definitely want to have sex with you right now, without somebody being like, wow, she's like super, super slutty or whatever. It's like, it sucks. It's just like, I like sex. Sorry. Like, and I have to feel like I need to say sorry sometimes and like hide it. And especially other women make me feel ashamed. Like other women are just like, wow, what a whore. Oh, how many guys did she fuck this year or this last month? Oh, did you see her go home with that guy? And it's like, we are the worst. Like the absolute worst. It's not just guys, it's everybody.
Oh, absolutely. We're all swimming in it. Like this is what I always say. It's that we're all participating in one way or another, right? For sure. There's a book I want to, and I'll post a link to it when you post it, but I want to direct our readers towards it's Yes Means Yes, Visions of Female Sexual Power in a World Without Rape. It's an edited collection co-edited by Jacqueline Friedman and Jessica Valenti, who, sorry, it's really glary on this, but who are both fantastic writers. But it's an anthology of things like exploring this idea and of like how can we how part of demolishing rape culture and building a consent culture is creating a world where we can say fuck yes, I want this, right? And taking down the barriers to that. I think one of the reasons that people are so like why slut shaming is so pervasive and like that like women, people of all genders participate in it is that there's like if we think back to like the notion of like women as like property, like which I mean is still true in some places, but I mean was true for like a long time, like across the like many cultures, right? And the idea that like women were a commodity to be traded, right? Like you belong to your dad until like then you belong to your husband, and then like women's access to women's sexuality and like sex from women was a commodity to be traded for other things. And I think that and articles in this really argue that that's still really relevant. And so the idea that like if you don't want to give up sex too easy, because if you give it up too early or too often or to the wrong person, then it's worth less. Like you are less pure, you're damaged goods. You should save yourself, right? Like save yourself till marriage or until like the appropriate protector or provider or whatever. And I think this kind of logic is more obvious in some, like, I would say probably like, especially like really religious contexts, like it's more obvious, it's more explicit. But even for those of us who aren't religious, like I think that logic still really informs it, right? And it has to do with the control of women essentially within a patriarchal society.
What do you think, as you were saying that, I was like, it seems it was obviously sounds antiquated, right? And I think also it's like it's kind of odd that it's just odd that this is the case, because I feel like one reason why people might slut shame is because they're jealous, right? It's they're like, oh, look at that girl, like she's getting laid more than me, if you're a guy or a girl saying that. But weirdly, if you were like, wow, look at her, that's so great, and you were like, wow, this is amazing, I think then more people would be getting laid because everyone's like, yay, like sex is great and sex is fun. Like she's doing it, I want to be part of it, you want to be part of it.
Let's just all have
sex.
Right
Totally. Like, yeah, I love that. Like, I think people experiencing sexual pleasure and expressing sexual desire is something to be celebrated. But I also think it's very threatening, right? Like to a lot of people for different reasons. Like whether it's I'm thinking I'm still mulling over the idea of like being jealous and like, but I think it has to do with going against like a particular social order, right? I don't know. What do you guys think? Like, what does that kind of bring up for you in terms of reaction or question?
Well, I was thinking that in a way it's great. Like, oh, it should be celebrated. Like, sex is awesome and stuff. Great sentence there, Adam. But at the same time, let's say you do eventually have children, and you're usually, the norm definitely in society is still like monogamous couple one-on-one, and so therefore it's a gregarious amount of sex in a relationship like that actually would be a bad thing for most people because they've usually said, I'm committed to this relationship, right? And I think partly that maybe this idea of if you're married, man and woman together, you have children, you're like a family unit, that kind of pervades into all relationships, and therefore even when you're single and you're just dating random people, if you're having sex with lots of people, it means you're not committed, and therefore you're not like good family unit worthy, maybe.
That's interesting. I mean, I think that like there's a whole diversity of like of human relationships to their own sexuality and human relationships to sexual desire. And like, even if we did like totally abolish these sex shaming structures, like a lot of people probably would still choose monogamy and like would still choose like a more conservative approach to sexuality. I'm trying to kind of make sense of your question still. Can you rephrase your question? That would be helpful, or your comment.
I don't know. I think it was just a point as like if. So my point was that I'd say that the traditional roles, if you're creating a family, is you're a right? And if you're in a pair and you have a family, it would be bad, probably ruinous to the family if one of those people is like going off and having lots of sex.
Right, but what if even within that? Sorry to interrupt, but even within, we can even think about this paradigm shift within that couple, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can't remember the specific number, but there have been studies on like women in heterosexual relationships who have faked orgasms. And most have at one point in their life, right? And a lot of these you can probably make the assumption were within like committed monogamous relationships. And like, I think that's really telling, right? Like, I think that tells us something about about kind of entitlement to sexual desire, and the idea that within like a kind of a traditional understanding of heterosexuality, that like part of this transaction of marriage or being in a relationship is like men's sexual pleasure in exchange for like his protection of the woman, right? And that women are less entitled to experience pleasure, to express desire, and or are lacking the language for it, right? Like, even if this is like a super safe, like equitable relationship, like that, we just like lack the kind of, the cultural language for a lot of women to even say like, I want you to like do this, or like that doesn't feel good, can you try this instead? Like some of the things we talked about last time in terms of like figuring out what your desires are and like finding ways to negotiate those. Like, there are so many barriers that are tied to like that's not what your value like it like is in a relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Kind of. I'm still kind of working this through, but
yeah, I feel like I just kind of have just taken it into a completely different direction that we weren't going initially. So we can just like drag it back. We can bring it back. I feel like Sam, you've been writing some things down. What do you think?
No, it's okay. It's not really, it's related more to what you're saying, but like I agree. Let's get back to the consent part.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have an idea of where I want to take it next, if you want, like kind of an alternative to the sex's kind of commodity model, I guess, and just to kind of, I don't know if I've used that language really fully yet, but the idea that like your sex is something that like women have and men pursue, like women give up in exchange for things, right? And the more you give it, the less it's worth. Like that's the kind of, when I use the language of commodity model, that's what I'm talking about. The idea, and a different way to frame it that I really like is thinking about sex through a model of like performance. And I don't mean like sexual performance or like prowess, but thinking about like a musical performance or like a musical jam. So a model that I want to offer, and this comes from the Yes Means Yes book as well, as this idea of a performance model of sex. And I don't mean like sex is in like a certain level of sexual performance, but rather like thinking about performance in the context of musicians and musicians jamming with each other. So for those like who might not be familiar with that term, like a jam, like when people jam and musicians jam, they get together and they play music in a way that's like not planned in advance. It's improvised, right? And so everyone like coming to that jam brings all, like, so they bring their instruments, they bring all of their skills and experience and their different kind of abilities to that in order to make music, right? And so actually, rather than like someone being more valuable, like if they like are, so I'm using this as a metaphor for sex, like this is where this is going. So like if our kind of model of like someone being like virginal and like not having given it up and them being more valuable is like how the sexist commodity works, that totally falls apart when we think about sex as a jam, right? Because like in this case, someone who is like really new to playing music, doesn't really know what they're doing, is not going to have necessarily a whole ton to add to that, right? Like it's actually the people who are like more experienced, and but of course like everyone is able to learn and offer what they can, right? But like someone but that actually adds to our experience. Also communication, even though like people are jamming and playing music, and like a lot of that will be nonverbal, there's also a certain level of having to set out parameters. So like, what genre are we going for? Like, are we feeling R&B? Do you play metal? Like 12-bar blues? And so a level of communication, and also like thinking about enthusiastic consent. And yes means yes. Like just because someone's standing there holding a bass doesn't mean that like like they're not participating in that jam, right? Like people have to be actively contributing and actively playing along. It's something that we do together. It's not something that one person does to another. Also, we can think about like, there's no such thing as a music slut, right? Like, no, it's not like, oh my god, this person like played music on Friday with one person and then was like playing on Saturday, like, and I think like even like twice I saw her like playing on Sunday. Like, what a music slut! Like,
there were like guys with her, 10 other guys, and then just her.
Yeah, right. It gets ludicrous, right? When we think about it like that. But and I think it's really helpful just to think about like this is something that we do with other people, that to bring enjoyment, to bring to experience pleasure, to express like our human creativity. Like I think that's a really beautiful way to think about sex. And where was I going to go with that thought? Yeah, just that's a helpful reframing. And also related to that, like that's the point, like is enjoyment, right? Like we jam with each other because it's fun. And
you're also listening to each other in the jam. So like you're not just come in and just start like, you're probably not going to go into like a folk jam and then just start like rapping. Like maybe probably not.
I would. Yeah. I love rapping. That's beside the point.
But like you're going to be listening along and you're probably going to go to the same beat, and you're going to be doing everything together as a collective, and you're listening to what's on. And I think that that's just such a good,
Yeah. And you create space for each other. Like if you think about jams, like create space for each other to solo, create space for each other to take the lead, right? Like it's I love what you said about like listening and vibing, and then like really good jams. Like I'm like a rookie musician, but I've been at a lot of jams at music festivals, and the people who've been doing this for like 40 years, it's such an art to see how they create space for other people to come through and take the lead, right? And I think if we apply that like to sex, like that just takes away all of like the shame and the stigma around like asking for what you want, or like kind of demolishes this idea as like, yeah, the pursuer and the gatekeeper, but rather like, no, it's collaborative, we're equals, and that's work towards that and like communicate in ways to make that happen.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah, I think that is a really nice way to think about it, and I think that's like a more positive rather than like pursuer and pursuant or pursuee. Like is that you're like working together. However, how do we is this the be all and end all? Like would this, like if guys think about it, like whoever guys think about it, if girls think about it, would that lead to, is there not a potential to say like, oh well, it's just those two jam together and they don't jam with anyone else?
And that's okay, like for people who have chosen that, right? Like I'm not saying this is an argument against monogamy for those who want it.
Yeah. Okay.
So, sorry.
No, go for it.
So I'm wondering, like, what are some ways that we can do to like change this model of thinking? Like, how do we get everybody to get on board with the jam? Like how do we get more people to jam with us rather than try and shame our jamming? Or how do we not feel shamed about jamming? Like if I want to do this, how do we break down these stigmas that we have in society? Like what are some constructive ways that you've seen, and like what do we do?
This is kind of what I was trying to get at before when I was talking about like marriage, in that like I feel like I guess I was trying to highlight one reason why there might be shame about it. Does that make sense? Like I can see, I love it, but the thoughts that are coming to my head are all like devil's advocate thoughts. But I just want to say that like I love the idea of a jam, and like it's way better that it is this collaborative thing. But I feel like some of it, there is still this kind of sacredness around sex, I feel, in that it creates life, and that there is definitely tension around it. And I think it's by diving into this tension and finding out like why it could be there, we can then figure out like why people don't feel as comfortable like going to a music jam and playing with loads of different people every single night versus like doing that sexually.
Yeah, and like again, like, and I'll respond to Sam's like in a second, but I think that like people like there's a whole range of like personal attitudes and beliefs towards sex and sexuality, and they're super deep seated, and it's not to say that that's someone necessarily who is like super religious and who does see like sex as something that is super sacred and only for one other person. Like I don't think that they're wrong and they're not allowed to have that. But I guess like I think that's part of like a broader like sexual freedom to be able to choose that. But what I'm really into is opening up the possibilities for experiencing sex and sexuality, giving us language so that people can like, I think true sexual freedom is to be able to choose among like a whole array of options for how we experience sex, and to make any of those choices without shame or negative repercussion. That's kind of my thinking about that. To Sam's kind of question, like what are some things we can do? Like a few things come to mind for me. one is like pointing out slut shaming when we see it. Like I think that like whether that's like comments that our friends make or like peer groups make, whether that's like the media, like I think the ways that a lot of like celebrities like are slut shamed, like we often see like young female like musicians go through like their kind of like coming of age where they become like really sexual, and like are really policed for that.
Sure.
But I think like pointing out and slut shaming and like railing against that and like and trying to like undo that and like criticize it when we see it is really important. Noticing when we might fall into that, because again, we're all saying it to like if we ever find ourselves doing that, which is like normal, and like, sorry, I dropped my pen. There we go. And like, yeah, we all have our own personal work to do. So that's one thing. I think also like practicing consent and practicing like inviting consent in lots of different contexts that are non-sexual. So I think we talked a little bit about this last time, but like if we try to like intentionally move through the world and like maybe even just for like a day at a time, like imagine like you went through a day, like imagine we're in non-quarantine life and you're kind of interacting with all the people who you would, and if you decided like for any kind of touch at all to explicitly ask for it, whether that was like a handshake or like a hug or like a what are these called, like a
Fist
what are
bump.
these, fist bump. I don't know why I just lost that word, but yeah, like, and so obviously that wouldn't be like supernatural, right? Like that would feel strange, but it would be interesting to see like what comes up if you do that, right? So to say to a friend like, I would really love to hug you right now, can I give you a hug? And like to invite like their consent, their explicit verbal consent, and just to see what comes up, right? And it might be surprising to see like what kind of like touch like people you assume people want because you always do that they actually like didn't want in that moment. If you allow people the possibility of saying no, if we kind of take all these moments of take the assumption out of like a lot of those moments of physical interaction, or even like just when we're asking for anything, just saying, you know, you can totally say no to this. I want to hear like what you really feel about this or what you really want to do about this.
A lot of this
so
is
kind of
coming up in real life for me because we live in a small town, and I keep running into people that I know, and a lot of people are not respecting quarantine. They're like, oh, this is stupid, it's a hoax, and they're like, come on, give me a hug, shake my hand, standing super close, and I'm like, you should be asking, and I respect my boundaries, and I've had to tell people to respect my boundaries and to respect this type of interaction, which is so it felt super weird to have to say that, because in normal life, like I would just accept somebody, you know, just giving me a hug, giving me a high five, and like not really think twice about it. But now I feel like society might change a little bit because of this. And we might actually be doing a bit more consent. Maybe, I don't know.
Interesting.
So I wanted to just make that observation because it really brought something for me, because this has happened a couple of times in the last week or so. But like, in terms of that, so that's helping to reframe the way that you think about consent, right? So that's reframing how it could change. What's the word? Changing how you would feel to be like a pursuer or gatekeeper. Is that kind of what you mean? Or just changing like the model of like how we see consent? Is that?
I mean, I think like that like piece around like practicing consent like really explicitly and intentionally and like inviting it has to do with just like trying to unlearn a little bit of like what this kind of structure or this like cultural narrative, like how that's ingrained in us. Like I think that we're all kind of swimming upstream against it, like and things like in terms of like dismantling that like larger structure though, I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with like also larger like movements that have to do with like gender equality and have to do with all kinds of equality. But I think that this conversation is also intrinsically tied to things like reproductive choice, and reproductive justice. I think this is fundamentally tied um, to conversations about labor, right? And to think about like all sorts of ways in which under I'm gonna get really political here, under capitalism and under like white supremacy and patriarchy, like our bodies are not our own, right? And obviously that's a whole can of worms, but I think that like but that sex and sexuality is in many ways at the intersections of lots of these things, right? And so I think that kind of to try to become as egalitarian and like political, I guess, in how we practice sex and how we think about sex, like that's like one small like microcosm of like these larger things.
For sure. And I have like just one more question kind of tied to this that I would like to just ask. So I mean, we're talking about like how do we change this model on the broader scale, and obviously there's a lot of things that go into that. Like, what are some things that we can do to ourselves, like as a woman, as a man, like to change the way that we perceive things? Because like I sometimes like I perceive that I'm, you know, like I don't like feeling slut shamed, and I sometimes, for example, like with this show, I have these fears that me talking so openly about sex and topics around sex will it's making me a bit fearful of how the world will perceive me. So like how do I change that, and how can we encourage other people to be able to change that mindset for themselves so that they don't feel this shame? Because I think that's a huge step in really getting that affirmative yes.
Well,
Totally.
go on.
Go ahead, Adam. No, go ahead.
I'd say like the first thing is being the change you want to see in the world, right? So if you want more people to not feel ashamed about talking about sex, this is like, I think this is one of the core reasons why we started this show, is that we are still scared to talk about it. We're still nervous. And I think like almost inevitably there will be people who dislike it. But kind of understanding that by being your true self, you're being polarizing, and therefore there'll be some people who like love you for it, and you will liberate some people by like being your true honest self and going for what you truly believe in. And then on the flip side, there will be some people who like hate it and like dislike you, but haters gonna hate. And
Totally. No, I think you're so right that like having conversations like these is a huge part of it. And like I just want to like validate like how you're feeling, Sam, around that is a super normal and valid way to feel, like in like, and I've had similar experiences, like even in some of the work I do, talking openly about sex in like really public spaces. It's like, oh, like what, how like might people be judging me based on this? And so, but I think that like that you can't, there's that old adage, like you can't be it if you don't see it, right? And the idea that like by like talking about this openly, it's allowing people to have, giving people a language and like I don't want to say inspire, but like inspiring people to think about things differently, and just give like role modeling a different way of understanding. I think courage is really important, and I really like there's a sex educator who I'm going to post, when you post this on Facebook, something from her as well. She made a video around the sex as a jam model that's like really short and wonderful. But she talks about courage very simply as like being willing to move through discomfort. And yeah, just knowing that it is hard, but like that by practicing courage and kind of moving through that discomfort, finding community to help us in that, finding your people who are sex positive and who are your comrades against slut shaming, and just like building up that community around you, I think, is super, super important. I have like a lot of very sex positive friends in my, I don't think you can be my friend if you're not sex positive. Like, I think that's like, if there's a checklist, that's on there for sure. And also I think like promoting, I'm just thinking right now of like all like the amazing artists who like use and explore sexuality in really awesome ways. And thinking about like Peaches, or like like who are just like very political in how they engage with like their performance of sexuality. That's like just finding ways to use those artists to think and to provoke conversation. And I could go on, but I think those are the main things: courage, community, conversation, the three C's.
The 3 C's.
Good 3 C's.
Cool.
That's like a very lovely way to end.
Yeah,
totally.
I think we kind of wrap that up really nicely with like some really positive messages there at the end about how I think really like we're living our truth by doing it. And you can as well, if you watch this and you like this, like, and you want to talk about it, like on the one hand, we would love to talk to you about it. And we think it's just the conversations that should be being had by everyone around the world.
And please comment, question. Like the inspiration for this show today was based on a comment. Yeah. So if you have questions around consent, if you have questions about anything to do with relationships, sexuality, friendships, the human condition, quarantine, I don't know, just drop us a line. We would love to chat with you about it either, or shoot us a message if you don't want to talk about it publicly, and we'll be happy to chat with you.
Yeah. And thank you, Roxanne, again for joining us. This was like so great.
Thank you. It's always so much fun to get to hang out with you guys and talk about sex.
It's good shit, right? It's good shit. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in another episode soon, and we'll see Roxanne in another episode next week.
Yay.
Sweet.
Bye.
Bye.